Hello, and I think it's wonderful there's another Trans States conference. I'm doing something a bit different from my normal thing as well. I research contemporary paganism, so witchcraft and druidry in the Irish context, and also the merging points or the interconnection between folk religion and esotericism. So I have a project planned. I want to do an ethnographic study of the Raelian church in Ireland, and I've been in touch with them, but I haven't yet started my field work, so I haven't done any interviews with people yet. So this paper is just some cursory observations on so-called UFO religion, so looking at extraterrestrials, revelation and planetary consciousness from Zecharia, Sitchin to Raëlism. The connection between cosmic beings and revelation has been the impetus for the formation of various new religious movements. Prophecy, visions, and alien human interaction through dreams are prominent in the discourses and cosmologies of such groups. Here I examine some strands of thought that prominently feature revelation. The discourse of many UFO religions featured the disclosure by extraterrestrials to humans of something relating to human existence. The disclosure may be related to divine beings who inhabit another planet, or interdimensional beings who are not considered divine, but who hold some secret knowledge about humanity, development of life on Earth, or spiritual truths of the cosmos. Some spiritual traditions are centered on communication with cosmic masters, which are extraterrestrial intelligences. Practices may include attempts at interdimensional travel through deep relaxation. For some followers of UFO religions, as is the academic categorization, I haven't come across anybody self-identifying as being a follower of a UFO religion yet. So for some followers of so-called UFO religions, the term alien is a misnomer because it has a connotation of something that doesn't belong, and also it has associations with fictional portrayals in films, literature, and media more generally, the news media, as something either horrific or ridiculous. Extraterrestrial, on the other hand, means not of this land, someone who is from outside of the Earth and its atmosphere, or from outer space, as humans would be extraterrestrials when visiting a place that is not their home planet. One popular theory that has influenced the development of various new religious groups and has thus been the impulse for ufology interest is author Zecharia Sitchin's work, based on the ancient cuneiform clay tablets, some of which were from the Mesopotamian city of Uruk, modern-day southern Iraq. So there's some different, you can identify two different strands of what's informing UFO religions and kind of the general trends and discourses. So one, as with Zecharia Sitchin, is the extraterrestrial creation of humankind, or splicing DNA or something like that, and the other is the so-called ancient astronaut theory, where aliens have interfered with human development or spurred it on in terms of technologies and civilizations, as with Graham Hancock and Eric Van Deniken and other writers. So Sitchin postulated that ancient astronauts, so Sitchin was a biblical scholar who became interested in these Sumerian clay tablets when he noticed similarities with the biblical stories. So he postulated that ancient astronauts, called the Anunnaki, that he equated with the Nephilim in the book of Genesis, brought their culture from their planet, Nibiru, to Earth, establishing the first known civilization of the Sumerians. According to Sitchin, Nibiru is outside Earth's solar system with a long elliptical orbit that occasions its movement close to Earth every 3,600 years. Popular discourses connect the planet's reappearance with prophecies found in various mythologies and sacred texts of the return of the gods, or of the god, where there's esoteric interpretations of the second coming of Christ. Some groups connect this theory of the second coming, the reappearance of the planet, with the tracking of Planet X, an unknown planet that is believed to be beyond Neptune, with prophecies of the end times that posit that the planet's movement is what is causing the changing weather patterns and increase in storms and hurricanes. So there's a lot of connections between various conspiracy theories and UFO religions and the general kind of discourses around that in terms of the government and NASA's non-disclosure to the people of Earth about what's happening. So others connected the idea of a returning planet with 2012 doomsday prophecies, but it's important to point out that Zecharia Sitchin, in his book series, didn't make any of these connections with 2012 or with this Planet X kind of conspiracy theories, or with the end times in that sense. So there's a lot that I won't have time to go in here but Sitchin also drew attention to visual depictions on the clay tablets, not just what's written in the cuneiform, but the artwork and the storytelling through images. And he claims that this particular tablet shows the solar system as we know it now, whereas others have made different claims that it's just the sun with some stars around it, that it's not a depiction of the solar system. So Sitchin also claims that the colours of the planets, as the Anunnaki were coming into the solar system, were described. So he questions how these ancient people would have known the colours of the planets and the detail that they knew about certain planets having a marshy environment and so on. So many UFO religions reinterpret older texts and cultural mythologies. As Christopher Partridge points out, it is helpful to remember that the new in new religions most often refers to the seeker rather than the religion itself. That is to say, most new religions are presenting old ideas in a new context and to a new audience. The majority of new religions are simply fresh variations on older religions now blossoming in places they would not have been found even several decades ago." End quote. Ufology and religious discourses alike point to indigenous peoples and accounts of, for example, sky people among different Native American cultures as descriptions of extraterrestrial contact. James Lewis, in his UFOs and Popular Culture, an encyclopedia of contemporary myth, makes a similar observation. He says, "Historians and psychologists have tried to track down the origins of UFO-related tales and narratives. This kind of work has revealed that most UFO notions are antedated by similar ideas in traditional folklore and mythology, and that nothing fundamentally new is being perceived. People have always claimed contact with superhuman or non-human entities. Strange things have been reported floating in the air, and inexplicable events of all kinds are found in abundance in the recollections of earlier times." End quote. It may be the case that the experiences and ideas about otherworldly entities are not new, but that understandings of the cosmic order, predestination, prophecy, and revelation are informed by the Abrahamic faiths, particularly Christianity, so that people interpret them in a particular way. The titles of Sitchin's books point to the theme of revelation, such as The Stairway to Heaven, The Wars of Gods and Men, Genesis Revisited, The Lost Realms, When Time Began, The Cosmic Code, The End of Days, The Lost Book of Enki, Divine Encounters, and the book There Were Giants Upon the Earth, and his essay collections such as Of Heaven and Earth. Sitchin's first and most well-known book, The 12th Planet, was retitled by the publisher as such as they thought it sounded better. Sitchin was in fact describing 12 celestial bodies: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the Sun, and the Moon in our solar system, but inclusive of Nibiru. So Nibiru was later called Marduk in the Babylonian texts, and Sitchin claims that the what has been called the mythology is actually a description of how Nibiru collided catastrophically with another planet called Tiamat, later described in Babylonian texts as a goddess. In the creation myth, the Enuma Elish, if that's the right way to pronounce it. Sitchin suggested Tiamat was once located between Mars and Jupiter. This collision, he claims, formed planet Earth, as well as the asteroid belt and the comets. Sitchin recounted that when struck by one of planet Nibiru's moons, Tiamat split in two, and then on a second pass, Nibiru itself struck the broken fragments, and one half of Tiamat became the asteroid belt. The second half, struck again by one of Nibiru's moons, was pushed into a new orbit and became planet Earth. Sitchin also speculated that Pluto was originally a satellite of Saturn, but when the passing Nibiru's gravity perturbed it, it was pushed to the outer solar system and continued in its peculiar orbital path, intersecting the orbit of Neptune. So people often pit mythology against science and so on, but Sitchin's account is giving he also goes into mathematics and the physics of it all, so it gives some credence to other perspectives. Sitchin's theory is that Nibiru is the home of a technologically and spiritually advanced, human-like extraterrestrial race called the Anunnaki. The Sumerian myths are the record of their descent to Earth and how they created Homo sapiens sapiens from a hominid egg and the semen of an Anunnaki male, thus crossing extraterrestrial genes with those of Homo erectus. Sitchin suggests they first arrived on Earth probably 450,000 years ago, looking for minerals, especially gold, which they needed to rectify pollution in their atmosphere, the particles, and for other technologies they used, so they found and mined gold in Africa. And some have made connections between this theory and the development of alchemy, as why is gold so important, and why is there such a strong esoteric tradition to do with gold. And then you have there's a whole moral question about the relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity. If human beings, as Sitchin claims, were created as workers to mine this gold when the Anunnaki revolted because the work was too difficult. So it's quite a different presentation of the gods and their motivation. So in short, the Anunnaki led a colonial expedition to Earth from planet Nibiru, according to Sitchin, and the divine right of kings was instituted when the Anunnaki eventually left selected human lineages in charge of the planet. The human kingship in Sumer was inaugurated to provide intermediaries between Earthlings and the Anunnaki on their home planet. So this is where the revelation comes in about messages from the gods and guidance of human beings. Sitchin claimed the events described in the Sumerian material coincides with many biblical texts, including humans being made in God's image and the deluge, and claimed that biblical texts are derivative, coming originally from Sumerian writings and changing through time. So he compares many of the passages of the Bible with the Sumerian material. So Sitchin also claims that during this colonial expedition to planet Earth, these were just more advanced people, but then in later time periods they were described as gods. So remembered as gods in the different cultures around the world, and there's also you get into the kind of paradigm of collecting, the anthropological way of portraying mythology as opposed to religion, and the different theories of cultural evolution, so that this material was presented in a different way in our world, as mythology being one thing, and viewed in quite a pejorative way, and religion being the Abrahamic faiths. So, as I mentioned, Sitchin claims that the Anunnaki are the Nephilim in the book of Genesis, and the most focused part of the revelatory exercise in Sitchin's work is his comparison between the book of Genesis and the cuneiform tablets. So similar interpretations of the Hebrew Bible can be found in Raëlism, or the Church of Rael, whose followers hold that a group of androgynous extraterrestrials who call themselves the Elohim created humankind using advanced technology, and they also look at the biblical passages and interpret Elohim as plural, which it can be in Hebrew. And the founder and current leader, Claude Vorhelon, also known as Rael, so he took Ra as the Egyptian god and El as a title, or he also calls himself Maitreya, as in Buddhism, describes an encounter with the Elohim where he was brought to their planet, a society that he describes as free of poverty, disease, racism, and war. Raelians understand Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad as part of a series of prophets, Rael being the last in the line sent by the Elohim to help to raise consciousness on Earth. Since 1945's atomic bomb, Raelians see the end of one kind of society and the dawning of an era of revelation. So this is an emic phrase. They use this, they call this time that we're in an era of revelation. And they see it as a time where humans of higher consciousness will work to save humanity and embrace technology for purposes of advancement rather than destruction. So they see that as their aim, their objective on Earth is to help other human beings see this truth and to raise the consciousness. So individual Raelians view themselves as being chosen ones to carry out this mission of raising consciousness, or they may be chosen by Rael to do this kind of work in getting the message to people. The role of revelation in the Raelian movement is significant. Central to their worldview is a political radicalism, with particular followers understanding themselves as guides for the whole of humanity, working to change people's mindset and to foster peace and love on Earth until Paradism is attained, and Earth will be ready for the arrival of the Elohim. So this is a Paradism. It's an interesting philosophy. It's a little bit like some forms of Christianity, and you have the opposite of the end times being a time of destruction when Jesus will return in this chaos. But they want to make everything nice on Earth and also show that they are welcome, and that nobody's going to shoot them down as they come in. So that's why they want to build an embassy. So I'll just conclude by telling you very briefly, at the heart of Raelian public gatherings is a sense of frolic, and people play with the stereotypical UFO imagery. So you'll see here with the inflatable green aliens. They participate in LGBTQ pride parades around the world, sometimes involving public nudity, as they support sexual freedom and see no shame in showing the human form. They're an interesting group to look at in light of the theories of Victor Turner and Richard Schechner in their examinations of performance art and ludic recombination in the activities of its membership. So that kind of human seriousness of play, as Richard Schechner calls it. Schechner, in his work Performance Theory, defines a theatre as a place where the only or main use is to stage or enact performances. So many of the Raelian public gatherings are held to enact performances as part of wider protests or expressions of solidarity, as with their participation in pride parades and things like breastfeeding in public or showing nipples or whatever it might be. So their activities demonstrate what anthropologist Victor Turner has described as a ludic capacity, where performers play with the symbols, form and meaning. Although the performances may appear light-hearted, overall the thematic content is usually quite serious in that it has to do with their mission of raising consciousness on Earth. The meanings expressed in these creative performances are ostensibly tied to serious issues affecting our planet, whether it is the environment and climate change or the oppression of people based on their gender or sexual identity. So they've spoken out strongly against the Catholic Church and child abuse and so on. This format presents issues in a humorous way without trivializing them and appear to be very improvisational and freeform, as is the ethos of the Raelian Happiness Academy. Thank you.
I think we were fascinated. Okay, so we have a little time for questions. If there are any questions.
Jenny, thank you very much. That was super fascinating. I wonder about Sitchin, never having read a word of Sitchin. To what degree is he presenting his stuff as super scientific? If you know what I mean, trying to scientize it and say, unlike some people out there, I'm basing this on like philology and physics and respectable knowledge forms. And to what degree is he not doing that? Is he revelatory or kind of saying like... The reason I ask is because the detail about these super advanced aliens coming and then the best way they're advanced technology, they can fly between planets and they can gene engineer species, and the best way they can figure out to get gold out of the ground is to engineer a new species to do some gold mining for them. That seems like radically implausible and silly. So that to me just strikes me as something he just kind of came up with. So how does he frame it? Do you see what I mean? In terms of science, mythology, all these kind of categories.
I think he's more on the side of scientizing it than the revelatory aspect. So what I didn't have time to go into the different groups, but I was saying as a strand of UFO religiosity, some of the ideas that are informing other groups seem to be coming from Sitchin's work, but he doesn't talk about revelation as such. Maybe in the Lost Book of Enki, it's there's the hidden knowledge or how it's been reframed in Christianity, but it's more like his basic claim is that this material is written down on the clay tablets and he's just translating it. It says all this, and as far as I'm aware, the academic scholars who study manuscripts and those ancient languages, they seem to have picked at particular words and their translation rather than the entire theory. So I don't study that material, so I don't know how correct it is, if, does it actually say all of these things in the tablets or not. But he's saying that, the information is there, that it's been modified and changed largely by Christianity.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for the lecture. I was just wondering whether you by any chance know this novel by Michel Houellebecq, famous, probably the best known contemporary French literary writer, who wrote this novel, A Possibility of an Island. Do you know that?
No.
Well, it will be interesting because it's based upon the idea that in a very near future, the Raelians are actually going to become the beginning of the new world religion. So they will succeed because one of them discovers a way of cloning human beings. So you get a complete new future of humanity, and it's entirely based upon the Raelian religion. I was just wondering whether you know that. Well, in that case, warmly recommend it. It's fascinating. It's an absolutely fascinating topic. And it seems to me that it's mostly French scholars who have looked at it, and not so much people outside the French world. So I'm very happy that you brought it up.
Well, I'll thank you for telling me about the novel. I'll read it. Just to mention that Claude Forelans, he's French, so that's maybe why, I don't know if that's why French scholars have looked at it more, but there were accusations from Raelians who'd left the church, and they said that they had come across there's two different books, and I can't think of the names off the top of my head, but in the 1950s, two popular books were written about people's experiences where they encountered extraterrestrials, and the claim is that Claude just took that material and used it to found a new religion, that he didn't experience anything himself. And I didn't go into the cloning side of things here, but I'm aware of their concerns in terms of doing ethnography, because the Raelian Church they're hyper aware of being infiltrated by the CIA and by other government groups because of their cloning activities.
Hey, thanks for the talk, which was really fascinating. I'm sort of interested in, if you sort of see any kind of shifts in some of this kind of UFO religions in terms of, because, there are other things that I didn't know about Raelians, for example, but things like Itherius society, which comes about maybe at a slightly similar time with slightly similar practices, and also an imaginary that's very much around the solar system, whereas, there's some more contemporary things where people have talked about, there's the whole starseed phenomenon, and people talking about, Pleiadians and having all these typologies of aliens that are quite a lot more complicated, or extraterrestrials, with about at least 9 or 11 different kinds. Lots of references to Sirius as well, but from Crowley through to, Robert Anton Wilson through to, people in the current day, and always this oscillation between sort of popular culture and things that might seem almost a little bit banal, and things that are, really, certainly people claiming to have very, authentic experiences. So I just wondered if you had any, are you interested also in this other kinds of approaches that are maybe less a UFO religion in terms of in an organized sense, and more like the sort of idea of a spiritual experience of having, let's say, some contact with, Pleiadians or something like that?
You're asking if I'm personally interested in it?
Yeah, or if you see any connections, or do you see any sort of maybe evolution in the way that this UFO lore has evolved or is evolving?
Try to keep it brief because we're going to have to get to the next speaker.
Yeah, I'll answer just by saying I'm a folklorist by training, so I'm coming at it from two perspectives. So I'm always very interested in people's experiences and how things are expressed, how the culture shapes how experiences are understood. So I would be interested in the contactee movement and spirituality, things like indigo children or seed children, as you mentioned, seed cosmic beings that are reborn, things like that.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for.